Come on in, guys, and welcome back to the Sit-Out Bench. I'm Matt.
And I'm Joe. We're two mates from the Midlands who are die-hard Survivor fans.
On today's episode, it is the long-awaited recap of episodes 1 and 2 of Survivor UK.
So take a seat on the Sit-Out Bench and we'll get started. Today is the day. It's the day we're recapping Survivor. But how are you feeling? How's everything going?
I'm feeling great. Really enjoyed both of the episodes. How are you doing, Joe?
Yeah, I'm doing really great. Yeah, like I said last time, half term here. Had a great day with the family, great day out. Obviously, Survivor was a family thing, so fantastic to have Survivor UK back on our screens, and a great first 2 episodes in the book. But I know, Matt, you had a bit of a crazy weekend. Story time.
Yeah, I couldn't watch the episode live on Saturday, unfortunately, so I had to watch them on iPlayer on Sunday. I was actually at Screamfest in Burton-on-Trent on Saturday night. It's a great event, loads of scare mazes. If that's your kind of thing and you live nearby, definitely check it out. But yeah, fun story to tell. So it was really busy, so we decided to upgrade our tickets to go on this new attraction, which was basically like you got on this like tractor trailer and it was just like rows of paintball guns, and the idea was that it was like an alien invasion. So like they took you around the back of this farm because it's all based at this farm place, and you had to shoot the aliens with the paintball guns. And these aliens were like actors dressed up, like,
No way,
in massive jumpsuits on with like masks on. So basically they were like, oh, anytime that you see one of the aliens, shoot at it. So we were going between these two like scenes that they'd set up with like derelict buildings, etc. And there was this person wearing a jumpsuit on a quad bike going past. So obviously everyone starts shooting them and like getting headshots and stuff. And then one of the guys who's on the tractor, he's like meant to be like a sergeant major type character, breaks character and he's like, guys, hold your fire. I think you just shot the farmer. And then this farmer pulls up like on a quad bike, effing and blinding, being like, you've just been shooting at me. What the hell are you playing at? And then the 2 actor guys are like, well, to be honest, mate, you were in the live paintball zone. And they're just like arguing. And then the guys are having to like microphone back to HQ or whatever, being like, oh, bit of a problem. It's so weird. But people were literally just shooting him in the face and all.
Wow, that's brutal.
Bit of GBH for your Saturday evening.
It's that farmer now listening to our podcast. Matt apologises.
I do apologise.
Oh, brilliant. There we go. Love it. Well, let's jump into Survivor then. Nice natural transition. Yes. Obviously, we had episode 1 and 2 of the new series of Survivor 2023. And actually, the reaction online has been really, really mixed. Some people have really loved it. Some people have sort of raised some questions around it. Overall, so we know that Strictly Come Dancing came just before Survivor on the Saturday, and that had around viewers of 7.7 mil. When it transitioned into Survivor, originally the audience started around 4 million, and averaged out around 2.5 on Saturday. That held pretty strong in terms of live viewing numbers going into Sunday, where the numbers were around 2.3 million for episode 2, which aired on Sunday. But more importantly than the numbers and online, Matt, tell me, what were your overall thoughts of the first 2 episodes?
I'm definitely leaning mostly positive. I think there was a lot of things that I disliked, but they're all like production choices. But I love the cast. I love the location. I thought the challenges were excellent. There was a lot of stuff there that felt very fresh. But yeah, there's just a few bits that we'll go into in a bit that I wasn't a fan of. But for the most part, I was really, really happy with it. How about you?
I felt really good having Survivor back on the TV. It was a really big moment. I felt it all of Saturday, kind of building up to it and really, really enjoying it. I was probably a little less keen on episode 1. I was probably pretty disappointed on episode 1, and I recognise that this is fresh for the UK. It's trying to get people into the spirit of Survivor, but like you said, there were a couple of key sort of strategic elements, gameplay elements that to me made it feel like a very dumbed down version of Survivor for an episode 1. And actually, I kind of knocked the BBC for showing episode 1 on Saturday and then immediately having episode 2 available on iPlayer. But I'm so glad they did, because I think it needed people like you and me to, watch episode 1, watch episode 2, and get things out via Twitter, via Instagram, saying episode 2 is so much better. And I really did feel like it was a totally different show after I watched episode 2. In terms of out of 10, I think episode 1 for me was a 4 out of 10. I think episode 2 was a 6 out of 10 and really lifted it. And I know that production can't choose, what happens in each episode, but I'm sure they were really wishing that the episode 2 could have been the first sort of season premiere, because that just felt so much more like Survivor. It was such better quality. So overall, I think, it's positive in the main part. Really glad to have Survivor back, and really thought episode 2 was much better than episode 1.
Yeah, so for me, I felt the premiere felt like an episode early on in Survivor US seasons 1 to 7. I'd probably say there wasn't much strategy going on, but I thought they managed to pack it with good character moments. The only time I felt it went a little long was in the first half with the marooning challenges and things like that.
Yeah, and I think you do really well to call out the characters. I think that is one of the things I really did love, seeing those people who we just had their short bios really come to life on the screen, and really sort of understanding them a bit more around why they're there, what are their motivations, and who are really going to be some big characters this season.
Yeah, I think if we'd been able to see some video interviews from pre-season, there's a couple of people who I definitely would have been higher on personally. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree. So the way we're going to go through our recap today, our plan is to kind of take it bit by bit. We're going to very much follow the story that we saw on both episode 1 and 2. We'll pause at certain parts and do some of our takes, maybe do a bit of banter. I'm sure we'll have lots of debates and discussions. So when this episode kicked off, we got straight in with kind of the promo, or kind of the trailer that we saw. And this was very similar to the trailer that they showed on the One Show, but probably with some extra scenes added in. And in true BBC style, in the first 2 minutes, they were already giving us spoilers.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people post online that opening 2 minutes of the episode, there were some shots in there that had no business being there. There's no reason to put them in there. Potentially showing spoilers as big as who the final 6 are. That's just sloppy. Why is that in there? It's just so stupid and unnecessary.
Yeah, you've got to think that it's an error that just kind of missed sign off. I did double check today to see if they'd gone in and kind of re-edited what was on iPlayer to take it out. They haven't at the moment. It's still there. And that particular shot you reference is, there's kind of a scene where there's 6 individuals in the water. And the reason we think they're the final 6 is on the beach, there are kind of these wooden structures that maybe they've climbed over or under, and all of them have different individual colours, hence leading us to think that they are 6 or the final 6 contestants in Survivor. Me and Matt have made a brotherly pact not to zoom in.
Yeah, to clarify, we do not want to know who the final 6 are. We want to be able to enjoy this with you guys and be as unspoiled as possible.
Definitely. But once that was out of the way, actually, we really got into it.
So at the start of the first episode, we have some over-the-top pop music, which another gripe of mine with the season so far is the over-reliance on pop music for no reason. And then we see them all walking along the dock and the silhouettes, and it's all a bit it's very traitors, it's very who will kill the other person.
Yeah.
And then and there's spy movie subtitles this is the time, they're at the dock, and then all of a sudden we just cut to the boat and then the tone just completely shifts. It's so weird.
I do agree with that. Yeah, I definitely thought they were trying to build on what the traitors had as a way to try and sell it to new people to stick around. Yeah. But the music choice, you're right, throughout the whole of this, really, really jarring, some of it.
I know your favourite was Old Town Road with Lawrence's intro package.
Don't even. That guy.
So funny.
So we got our 18 castaways on the boat, ready to get going. Joel, in true sort of Survivor fashion, speedboating in, and sort of getting to know some of the cast. And really we got our sort of first sense of Joel as both the host and also the type of character that he's going to take on. What I should mention is we're probably going to jump around a little bit in terms of some of our discussions. We might talk about a topic and include things from episode 2. And I think this is a really natural time to talk about Joel as a host. Matt, how did you find him?
So I was a bit all over the place, personally. So episode 1, there were times when he stuck out as feeling a bit out of place. Episode 2, I didn't notice it as much, but it was also completely the opposite as to how I thought. So when he was trying to be serious, to me, that stuck out as being a bit awkward. Like, I know you probably disagree. You don't really want a funny host, as it were. And I would prefer not to. But I think if Joel is his natural self, to me, that would feel better and be a better fit for the show than to force serious moments.
Yeah, I would agree with that. My real critique of Joel is I think he was very excited for the episode, and you've got to be nervous as well, haven't you? This is his first primetime show that he's hosting for the BBC. Obviously, he's done The Masked Singer, but for the BBC, this is like the first one.
Yeah.
And I think when you're in that situation, you revert to type, and his natural type, like you said, is a comedian.
Yeah. And
I've watched a couple of his sets. He's a very sort of one-liner, punchline, punny comedian.
Oh, yeah.
And some of it was too far for me. Like, let me just give you a couple that he said across the whole episode. He said, I feel like Braveheart riding in here. He said, great thinking by Pegleg, or in fact, crate thinking, when he was pushing down a crate. He said, there are more knots on the rope than your headphones after they've been in your pocket for 5 minutes. He also, after a fishing scene, said, there's one contestant who's floundering. Like, I'm all for comedy, but there were parts that were just like, they were too much for me.
But at the same time, I think there was some funny bits as well. I think not necessarily his puns, but I think he was quite witty and not afraid to take the mick out of the contestants a bit during the challenges as well. Like, I think it's episode 2, or maybe it's episode 1, whenever it was that Tanuki failed on the slide challenge, and it was like, she's clearly not bothered about fishing today or something. Like, I think that's good. I think he needs to lean into being his natural self and just not push it too hard.
Yeah, defo. And I think that will happen actually over the season. I think as he gets more comfortable, he'll know when to be funny and have those really great moments, like you said, and when not to. The one that really took me out of it, if I'm honest, was after the reward challenge in episode 2, where there's like almost 7 seconds of him going up to Matthew, giving him a bulb of pepper. I was just like, this is just taking me so out of Survivor. But yeah, I thought he did well. I liked him in tribal councils. I think, again, those sort of pointy questions will evolve as he gets more used to it. So yeah, I think all in all was okay.
Yeah, I want to give him the whole season to pass fair judgment, I'd say. Like, as a premiere, on the whole, it was extremely awkward. And Joel felt awkward within that. So I think it just needs to settle into its boots and just learn to walk. What the hell am I talking about?
That's staying in the edit.
Oh, God.
And that did come through. So he started by talking to some of the contestants. So he spoke to Jess and sort of talked to her about, what's life going to be without a toothbrush. He tried to engage Richard in a conversation about what his skills were. Richard quickly shut that down. Yeah. Didn't want to give anything away in case he became a target. And then the challenge started. And it's a very classic Survivor challenge, the first reward challenge, where all of the contestants had to load as much of the cargo that was there on the boat. They had bananas, they had papayas, they had coconuts, they had bamboo. They had to load up the crafts, then race to shore. Once at shore, they had to drag their boats up, then build a fire, snap a rope, and ultimately releasing the saw, the rope, the tarpaulin, and all of those important things that they would need to build a really successful shelter and camp. It was a good challenge. Calaton got out to an early lead. Lenena caught up with them, and ultimately Lenena takes the first victory. What were your thoughts on the first challenge, Matt?
So I like the giant fire-making setup. That's quite fun, considering we've seen smaller versions of that in the US, obviously. There was the Joel and the banana moment. That was kind of bizarre, where he just chucked that banana skin overboard. And I was just, how do you think the fire building strategies themselves played out, because obviously Calaton get off to a good start, but then their fire sort of collapses, and then on the wide shot it looks like Lenena's fire isn't doing that well because it looks like it's blowing off to the side, and then suddenly they show the rope snapping, and I was just very confused as to how all of that happened.
Yeah, I think you always have a choice, right? As soon as I understood what the challenge was, I immediately knew that both tribes were not going to keep their supplies.
Yeah.
And I think, no one thought they would. And so you have a strategic decision, I think, really early on. It's, am I going to waste time filling up the raft and it being heavier, getting it to shore, and risk, burning myself out and not getting any reward? Or do I go really early, not have a huge amount of supplies, but at least I win it and I get whatever, the rest, the main prize or the main reward is, which is that saw, the tarp, the flint, all that jazz. And I was really surprised that they decided to load them up so heavily. Well, to be honest, I was first surprised that the production was giving them so many different things. There was a lot of choice, a lot of food for them to get.
It's kind of refreshing though to see that again after the new era of Survivor US, where it's like you'll start with literally nothing. No, it's like here's 87 kilos of bananas just all over the side of the boat.
I'm hoping it lends itself really nicely to like a Jeremy banana etiquette moment.
Yes, definitely.
But yeah, to your point, I think for me the correct strategic decision there is fill up the raft a little bit, get to the shore early, and then start to build the fire.
In terms of the actual fires themselves, do you think that Calaton's had too much kindling within the base and that's what caused it to start collapsing, or do you think it's literally just the wind and the fire starting to burn things?
Yeah, I thought it was a crapshoot by the end. So I thought very much the scene where you had both of the tribes standing back, I got the sense that they'd used all of the wood they could.
Yeah.
And they were just hoping now that it burned through the rope.
And what was Lenena's windbreaker made out of? It was like this big black sheet of fabric, and I couldn't work out where they got that from.
I'm not sure what it was, but to me it looked mesh. It looked like it was not doing a great job keeping out the wind. Yeah, I think it's just build it hot, build it high as you can. I really liked that Lawrence was kind of putting some of the smaller branches at the very top of the structure, hoping they'd catch fire at the top. I think that was a good strategic move, but beyond that, I think you're kind of at the survivor god's hands, aren't you? If the wind's going to blow in your direction, if it's going to be a good first challenge.
Yeah, and I also liked how they started setting up Sabrina's arc in this challenge. So obviously we get this whole, she's loud, she's annoying some of the tribe mates, and we see in this first challenge how she's already starting, come on guys, taller. I think she shouts taller about 8 times within the space of 3 seconds. But I think that's interesting and something to watch forward as to how they're setting up these storylines. Will it be the case of the 2 boots each week? We'll see a sort of arc there, or will it be a longer thing? It'd be interesting to see how they sort of build that up.
Yeah, it definitely will be. Definitely will be. I think one thing we weren't surprised though, and to be honest, it's a little bit of the rich getting richer. When we did our cast assessments, we were convinced that Lenena was going to be dominating in these challenges. Even more so now.
Yeah.
Have all the food. Have the other tribe is dejected. And I, like I said, earlier, I'm surprised at how much they did get. That is a lot to start your camp life with, isn't it?
Yeah, that was loads.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking maybe it's too much, but then my partner said, won't all that fruit go off in 2 days? And I was like, maybe that's true.
Yeah, I don't know. They seem to be eating. I think you're right. Probably a lot of it will, but there'll still be some bananas, I'm sure, some green bananas that will go ripe. And
yeah, this is true. It is a massive benefit, especially, as we see Lee scream continuously at the opposite tribe. They're well fed and they've got all the energy and they're ready to go. So I think it definitely does play a big factor into their early victories there.
Yeah. After the first challenge, we moved then into kind of camp life. So we start off first at Lenena. And the first thing that happens is we have kind of the big group circle. We're assuming they've all introduced each other and they start talking about what they need to do. Initially, my sort of first impressions of Lenena at camp life, it starts with Chris sucking up. And I think sets probably his character tone for the rest of the show.
At first, when he did that, I was like, "Oh no, is he going to like come across a bit false to the rest of the tribe?" I was worried that he's going to paint a target on his back by being so like, "We've got this, guys, come on!" But I think it worked out for him in the end.
In reality, would you ever say to a group of people, "Guys, I'm just so excited to be part of this tribe"? I don't know.
Yeah, but conversely, someone who I just wanted to point out a comment that Ren made here, because I thought they came across as really funny and authentic, is when someone said that basically they've got to get started when they were sitting there discussing their plan, and Ren said, "Yeah, otherwise we'll die," which I greatly appreciate.
Calling it as it is.
Yeah.
And the rest of the tribe does get started. So Sabrina and Pegleg make the fire. There was a great moment where Pegleg talked about how, with his false leg, it was really important that he keeps the sand out.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a constant challenge for him. And then we flip over to Calaton, and their camp life is starting slightly more dreary. Richard is rubbing 2 pieces of wood together, trying to start a fire. But what I really liked is Jess is making connections with Matthew and Laurie already. She's saying a bit of the human side. Nathan is thinking about who's working, who isn't. And Shy already starts worrying about how much weight the structure will hold. Is it a good structure? And people sort of commenting on that. What were your feelings around some of those camp life scenes? What were your key takeaways?
Yeah, so initially I was worried for Jess because we get her standing there chatting to Matthew. Lawrence walks past with a log, and at the same time Nathan's giving this confessional about how people aren't working. So I was thinking, oh no, is Jess going to get immediately painted as someone who's not working hard around camp? But then it turns out he's not really talking about Jess. No one brings up Jess's name for the whole of it. And what we instead get is a lot of great scenes throughout the episode, actually, where Jess is having one-on-one conversations with people. Seems to be really endearing herself to them. And I'm very impressed with her social game and how well she seems to be fitting in, despite having this whole I'm a fish out of water type narrative across this episode.
Love that take. Jess is such a riser in this in terms of being able to connect with people. And even with Lawrence, can I call you Laurie? I love nicknames.
He says, no, call me Van. Hilarious.
Oh, man. But yeah, she really as well, across both episodes, I think she really came forward as a strong narrator. Yeah. I don't think her strategy was maybe there as much, but definitely as a narrator, giving those good expositions and the good confessionals, really, really liked her. I think Shy was also getting a bit of a bad rap in terms of, is he doing what he's supposed to do around camp? Is he being bossy? I think you need the person who does it will always get that title, but in some ways you do need that person. He wasn't saying anything too crazy. Don't chop off your fingers. This isn't going to hold us.
Yeah, so the way that it came across crazy in the edit is because of the way they edited it together. So they had this whole scene where he was telling people what to do. Then we had Jess's confessional where she said he's not very good in social skills. Then we get Shy's intro package where he says, I have great social skills. Then we see him bossing people around the camp. And then they cut back to Lynetta, and then they cut back again. It's midnight, it's really dark, and Shy's still telling people how to build a shelter. So I think it's just the way that they've cut that makes him look way worse than it probably is.
Yeah, definitely. I think Jess is probably right that his communication skills need some work. I think he's probably getting on a lot of people's nerves, like she said. It didn't look great for Shy in terms of the future outlook. But I did love in Jess's confessional, though, that she started talking about what she did back home. And she said, after she has a little bit of a wobble around not having enough food, she makes a comment that she's a fittings model and not a photography model. So, Matt, what's the difference?
Yeah, this interested me. So, from what I could tell, purely based on visual clues from the intro package, she seems to be someone who fits a certain size dress, and when they make new dresses or whatever, they measure it against Jess or something to do. Like, she models the sizes for clothes. That's what I can work out from that. It was an interesting package. I like the fact that she was like not to be confused with a photographic model, because I think just saying that she's a model would have done a disservice to how interesting and unique she is as a person, I think.
So you think by saying fittings model, she immediately became more interesting?
Yeah. No, I think the fact that she distinguished between that, she's coming across as someone initially, I'm a girly girl, I don't go out with a face and makeup. But I think just through that intro package and through everything else we get from her in the episode, there's so many layers to her, and I think there's a lot to come from Jess.
Yeah. One of the things that we didn't get in this sort of first camp scene is really people forming alliances. And that was one of the things that felt quite jarring, because usually in Survivor, those first 24 hours, people are making very quick connections. And because, it's the real critical way to survive, to have an alliance and have the right people around you.
Yeah.
Were you surprised that they didn't start forming?
So, what I would say is no, but also I think to some level alliances probably were formed, and I think given the structure of this premiere, I think a lot of, obviously at the start we got a load of this game's about alliances, blah 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of it on the actual beach was probably cut out, because if you look at who voted for who was hanging around with who, there's very clearly a core group on that Calaton tribe, I'd say. And just because they looped in everyone onto the vote that it was going to be Richard going home, I think the editors didn't deem it necessary to show us these closer relationships. It was a case of the tribe voted this person out.
Yeah, I could see that. And that leads right then into the next scene where they get tree mail. And I'm over tree mail already. I wasn't a fan of tree mail originally. I'm not a fan that it's back. Definitely not a fan that it's just a wooden flap in the jungle that they poke a scroll into.
Tree mail, I think, I like the fact that tree mail's back. It feels back to basics, but it's a literal letterbox on a tree. Like, I think was it George had done a tweet where it said the first person voted off the island was the art department.
I think it is so unnecessary. Like, I know they're catering to a new audience, but when they go to a challenge, we understand it's a challenge. You don't need to give me a little riddle and have me try and sit there and think about what could it be. I just think just get them going. It's wasted screen time for me.
Yeah, so in current US Survivor, they do have tree mail, but they just don't show it in any episode ever. So I think it's something that's fun for the castaways, but I think as you get into the show, it becomes a lot less necessary to show to us, especially when they're doing these whole cool challenge explanations. And I really like the fact that we're getting the names of the challenges on the screen and everything.
I think one of the things it could be used for in the future, though, is if this tree mail keeps going on, is that production can start to plant when two people need to have a conversation, either because maybe they're in an alliance or maybe they're on different sides and they're hoping there'll be some sort of clash. It's a great way to kind of manufacture some friction or some action that they could capture without anyone else walking in.
Yeah, I completely agree. And in this particular tree mail section, Pegleg says to them on their way back at Lenena, less talking, more walking, when they're talking about what's on the tree mail. Pegleg, I mean, he certainly fulfilled one side of my wild card predictions for him across these two episodes. I think he's excellent TV. I'm very much enjoying him watching him.
It is. I did note when Pegleg, even in episode 2, he's saying "suck it up" already. He is no hold spar.
Yeah.
Both tribes then go into our first immunity challenge. And it's a Survivor Classic where everyone has to hold a barrel filled with water, and as the first tribe to drop the barrel loses. Obviously, people can drop out if they need to, as long as they pass the weight over to someone else to hold on. Joel sort of sets out the challenge, and before they get started, he unveils this season's immunity item.
To quote the great Eliza Orlins, it's an effing stick.
This was brutal.
They dressed a tree stump up as Cleopatra and were like, here you go.
This is national TV, prime spot. Lots of money was invested in this. Some fake gold screwed into a log was just a terrible choice. Terrible. Oh,
I like to think that all those little pieces of metal were like part of a proper one, and then someone broke it, and they were like, "Oh no, what are we going to do?" And then they just screwed it all onto a log.
Oh man, I think what's definitely clear, and we've sort of had this confirmed by multiple people who were on production, is that even the castaways themselves were not impressed. I think when they unveiled it, there was a real look of what the hell is that?
And even the reactions shown in the episode, like on first glance, they might be like, "Whoa, that's crazy," but actually, if you watch them again, they're very much looking at it like, "What is this?"
Yeah, there's a great still of Lawrence, like looking at it like it's it's someone messy coming out of the Eton Club, like. And it's not hard to. Is it hard to get an idol? I feel like I could go to Amazon right now and I could find 20 better options for an immunity idol that could be delivered tomorrow.
Yeah, what baffles me is they made the sit-out bench look like a literal throne. And like they've put so much effort into these challenges, and then something as commonplace on the screen as the tribal immunity idol is just a log. Like, I don't understand the thinking behind that.
No, it doesn't make sense. And I can always guarantee that someone's going to burn that thing. By about episode 7, it's going to look different because it'll have been half in the fire for a night. Not a fan of the immunity idol.
No.
We move then into the challenge. There's lots of trash talk. A very funny moment at the start where Leilani can't actually pull the weight of the barrel all the way back to the position.
Leilani's giving in a totally different way than I was expecting it to, I have to say. Like, I was expecting it to be like a lot more wild, but she's actually quite a reined-in person on the beach, so I'm pretty impressed with how she's playing. Obviously, this isn't a great start for her, but she manages to balance it out.
Luckily, she had a He-Man next to her to be able to pull it back. The challenge starts about 14 minutes in. Leilani drops out. And Nathan and Shai then take over, and they're passing it between themselves. We also had then the next person to drop out was Sabrina over on the Lenena tribe, who passes to Lee. Finally, Rachel of Calaton drops out and then passes her weight to both Richard and Matthew to share between themselves until ultimately Richard gives in, drops the water barrel, and Lenena secure their first immunity win. How did you feel about the challenge? What are some of your key takeaways, Matt?
Yes, there's a few things I want to point out here. Firstly, Lee's crap talking to the other tribe. Terrible strategy. And it's so funny because he has no idea that it's a terrible strategy. You were totally right with the Lee build and edit that you predicted in our predictions. It's definitely coming full force here. Another thing I wanted to point out, 37 degrees the temperature reached while they were doing this challenge. Side note, I love all the little captions that they keep putting on the screen at random moments. They're great as well. But it's fun to know the temperature. And also, I wanted to shout out Jess again because we didn't see her in this challenge really at all. The camera never focused on her, but she managed to pull it out. So she was a lot stronger than we gave her credit for there.
Definitely. I want to circle back to Lee if we can.
Yes.
I am so here for Lee. Like,
oh yeah, like, incredible TV.
I'm so high on him. Like, and the thing is, right? So I love to play sport, and there's almost two types of trash talk, right? When someone's just really bad, then I won't give them any detail or thought in my trash talk. I'll be playing basketball, and I'll just say, "You suck. You can't guard me." In your face, that kind of thing. And then there's like another level where the person's actually quite good. And my trash talk changes and I start complimenting them to try and throw them off their game. They make a shot, great shot, bro. Try and do that again next time. I really like that, well done. Lee's trash talk was neither of those. It was, you don't have the calories. You don't have the calories.
Guys, give up now.
It was the most BBC trash talk I think I've ever heard.
I can just see everyone getting so wound up with it.
But I really liked it. And even when he took the weight and he was like, the first time I've had any weight all challenge. It was when he took the one from Sabrina. That was absolutely golden. So definitely there for the pettiness.
Definitely. So there's a couple of things we need to talk more about here. The first being Ashley's hand injury. So what did you make of that?
So I think first thing, Ashley, you have to send us the injury. You know, I didn't really get a good sense of it. Obviously, she said that the grip tape on her ring fell off, and so she was holding the ring and it was cutting into her skin. And the way she was describing it, both now, and it's a big part of episode 2 where she talks about how her hand's injured and she can't do challenges. It makes it sound like this thing like drilled down to the bone and there was like, major injuries. But at the same time, when the challenge finishes, she's quite upbeat. She's like, "Oh, do you want to see my hand?"
Yeah.
She's clearly not too worried about it. So credit to her for staying in, fighting through the pain. But I didn't really get a sense of how serious the hand injury was, and don't get quite why we didn't see it.
Yeah, and also begs the question: what the hell are they making the rings out of? Like, how is a cylindrical object cutting through someone's hand?
I don't know. Some of that gym equipment I go to, it's pretty dangerous. It's pretty...
Dodgy stuff.
The way I do it, anyway, it's probably probably not the right way.
The other thing we need to talk about is Richard dropping the barrels. What did you make of that? Because I believe him when he says that he felt it slipping through his fingers, but also he yells out, stands up, and both barrels drop at the same time. So obviously, I take that as he knew he was losing it, so he got up, yelled out to let everyone know he dropped it, and then dropped them. But part of me thinks it would have been a better strategy to just let one go and fall slightly, because the way he did it looked like he just stood up and gave up. So I can see from like Nathan's perspective, for example, why it looked a bit dodgy.
Yeah, I think the body language wasn't great. I think that's right. But I had to go back and watch this several times, and I think he's getting a really bad rap. In fact, we've chatted about this before. We both doing it, and it kind of ties into how people perceive him, right? So one of the big knocks that people had after the challenge is they said that Richard gave up. And you're right, body language wasn't great. But if you go back and watch, right, in the challenge, Leilani gives up first. Yeah. I think she can have a slight pass. It's not the challenge for her. She's not got the kind of the body mass, hasn't got the height. Okay, let's give her a pass. Rachel also drops out. Okay. Yeah. And no one at any point says anything about her. There is no comment about Rachel dropped out, she gave up, nothing like that. Because the fact that she dropped out and handed it to someone somehow means what she did was better.
And despite Richard being one of 4 people who holds up 2 barrels at some point in the challenge, he later gets called one of the biggest liabilities of the tribe.
Totally. And it doesn't make sense. So Nathan, I think, came really forward in this challenge as kind of the obvious leader.
Yeah.
And he's standing next to Shy and he is directing traffic. He's saying, give me a moment, you take it. He's clearly a great communicator, this kind of thing. And so it's easy for Shy to follow that lead and understand when to take things. When Rachel gets ready to give up the ring, Richard tries. He says to Matthew, "I'm going to need you in a second." And you can tell that Richard, I think, is trying to hand over the weight. And the scene that got me is Richard says, "Matthew, take this. I'm not going to be able to hold it." Matthew takes it. He's screaming like in pain. And then he says, my fingers, it's going. And Richard says, "I can't hold it." he says, "I can't hold it." And then he takes it anyway because he has to.
Yeah.
And so, the guy's tried to communicate. He's told you, "I'm burnt out. I can't hold it." They force him to do it, and he does drop it. I think the better move would have been Jess passes one to Nathan. Jess takes one.
Yeah, they needed to shuffle them over further than they had done.
So Richard would have one, Matthew would have one, Jess would have one, Nathan would have 2, Shy would have 2. That's probably your best chance of going a little bit longer. Yeah, I think you got a really raw deal.
Yeah, completely agree.
And let's play out scenarios, right? Okay, so let's say Richard is in the challenge, okay, and he says, "I can't hold these 2 rings." Let's say he communicates really, really well. Yeah. And he says, "Someone's going to have to take this weight." And somehow they manage to do it. Maybe Matthew takes 2 and Richard goes and sits down on the bench. If Matthew then dropped them, would Matthew be the scapegoat or would it still be Richard's?
No, it would still be Richard. Even if he just shoved it into Matthew's hand and then Matthew drops it, I still think that was always going to Richard. So one of the things that I felt when watching this episode is that the way people were targeted made no sense if it was to be purely about the challenge. So I think either Richard had done something worse that wasn't shown, which I don't necessarily think is the case, because we saw that he had an interesting bond with Tanuke going on there and she didn't want to vote for him. Or Leilani did something good that endeared her to her tribe and made people want to keep her around, which I think is more likely the case there.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the rationale that they gave to the camera of he's a challenged liability, he's a quitter, that's just not true.
Yeah.
and it's okay, I think, to say actually maybe we just don't have a strong connection with him going forward. Because I think that's the honest answer. He just didn't resonate with the people there. He was the odd one out. If we can look at pictures and we can, play the clip of me correctly predicting that he's going to be the first boots, play that now. There's one man who is either all or nothing for me, and everyone knows this. It's the man who's already wearing his coat. Give me Richards. And I think we can almost, describe what's going to happen. I think we've talked about this before, but in the early part of the game, that blue tribe is going to dominate the orange tribe. Yeah. I don't see a way that orange wins immunity. So I think orange goes first, has to be someone on that tribe. And I look at that tribe, and I just think it's not in Richard's future to stay, unfortunately. I think he's going to be the first boot. If I can see that from pictures, it's got to be pretty obvious when he was there, that maybe he just didn't fit in, and that was the reason they voted him out.
Yeah, poor Richard was never going to get a ticket into the no-coat gang, so I think he was on the outs for the start.
So after the immunity challenge, we then go back to Calaton Beach, where they start to think and start to scramble around who they're going to vote out. And there are really three kind of primary targets. So the first one that everyone's talking about is Shy. And they're really talking up this angle of he's disliked by a lot of people, he rubs people the wrong way, but ultimately that his behaviour at the challenge and how he was able to really be a source of strength actually kind of saved him a little bit. We got a little bit of kind of action between, as you said, Tanuke and Richard, who were chatting at the well, and they seem to be the only really sort of obvious alliance that was being formed around, if it's not Shy, who should it be? Maybe it should be Leilani. I thought Nathan was super bold with Leilani to say, if it's not Shy, then I was thinking you. Yeah. That was very rare that he kind of says it could be you.
I think it's very in fitting with his persona. I mean, not persona because it's who he is as a person, but like that's the way he's presenting himself on the island. And I think if you're that strong and threatening in that way, then being honest is better than also coming across as strategic.
Yeah, agreed. And then the only other person who's really comes up, Jess, is also feeling about Shy. She's unaware that Richard's an option, and Leilani is the other name on the chopping block. But very little was said about her. I think, people kind of mentioned their name. I think Tanuke and Richard at the well, but that was it really. I don't think Leilani was ever really in the picture. In terms of the scrambling, Matt, what did you like? What did you see?
Okay, so there was two things that I wanted to talk about really here. First is a slight gripe with the edit. So Leilani doesn't get any screen time or confessionals prior to the challenge, which basically tipped me off that she wasn't going home. So for me, it was always going to be between Richard and Shy. Second thing I wanted to talk about is my only worry for Jess, which was that she didn't seem to be aware that everyone was voting Richard. Either that or she chose to vote Shy, which, could be fine for her, but also could lead to problems later down the line. But I think it was quite interesting how the names went around the camp and how it was perceived to be like a three-way race.
Yeah, I agree. That really ties in. The Jess thing really stuck out to me as well. In the confessional, she doesn't even understand that Richard's an option there. And it makes me think she's a great narrator, a really social person, but maybe not someone that they're trusting with the strategy, with the plan. Or like you say, maybe she just doesn't stick to it. She doesn't quite understand what the nuances of the game are to form an alliance and vote correctly. So they're going to tribal council, and really they're kind of the same core arguments. Richard is talking about how he tried his hardest, but he wants to keep the tribe strong. they talk a little bit around there are some challenges suited for other people, not for others. And it was a pretty bland tribal council, I thought, in terms of what we got. Very, very similar to what was said in the scramble. Ultimately, it goes to the votes. And so everybody votes for Richard, apart from Richard himself, who voted for Leilani, and Jess, who voted for Shy. So Richard becomes our first official boot of Survivor 2023. How did you find Tribal Council?
I have many thoughts on this first tribal council specifically. So first of all, just in terms of like the strategy and what went on, I thought Leilani did a good job of owning up to her mistakes in a way that made it sound like she'd be able to do the next challenge and she wasn't going to be a liability for the team. And I thought pointing out the fact that they've not eaten for 3 days at that point because they haven't got fire was pretty insane. Like they must literally be shutting down and dying. But in terms of the production value, many gripes here. First of all, the lighting and the contrast for the tribal was completely off. Richard looked like a strawberry. like everyone who had sunburn on their face was bright red. The tribal parchment was an absolute disaster. Like you couldn't read what people had written when they were holding it up. Joel couldn't open it properly. Like, how had they not tested these things out? It's kind of ridiculous. And then also both the voting urn and the torch snuff looked like they'd been made in a beginner's pottery class.
I said in our season predictions, I don't know if you remember this, Matt. I said that these people are British people who would get sunburnt. I'm not sure how much of that is just lighting or how much of that is just they are like extremely red at this point.
I saw Doug's arms are bright red on the forearms and white on the upper half in the second challenge.
Let's get a proper farmer tan.
Yeah.
Yeah, the part that really struck me as interesting from the whole tribal council as well were the bits that Joel didn't say. So I was just gagging for him to say, in this game, fire is life. But he didn't say it. He gave like a weird sort of, as long as you have fire and it's not snuffed, then.
It was like he misquoted everything that's like a classic Survivor line.
Yeah. But the other big thing that stuck out to me, and as soon as he said it, I was like, where is it? Is when he's going to read the votes, and obviously he says, or rather, when he doesn't say, if anyone has an immunity idol and wants to play it, now is the time to do so. And we found out later at the end of episode 2 that immunity idols will be added into the game. We're probably expecting something in episode 3 or episode 4. But it just made me think, have they told the cast there are no idols up until day X? Have they told them nothing? Has he said the line and it's been edited out? Because if I've noticed it, we've got some Survivor diehards on there. They would have as well.
I would assume... So they might just be adding them next week, in which case that's kind of weird. But I also understand why you wouldn't want anyone to find them yet, so that people can get used to the format who are new to the show. But I think him just saying the line and the medicine out is equally as likely.
Just quickly with Tanuke as well. She was like a step away from Judas. So Richard is there saying, "Oh, I really trust my teammates," and she gives him blows the kisses. She blows the kisses at him, then goes and just writes down his name and votes him out. I
think Tanuke is quite clearly the best player on this tribe by miles. Like everything she's doing across all of the episodes is just because it's not being called out, so like you wouldn't really tell as a new fan, but as people who've watched Survivor, you can just see everything she's doing, and it's just very, very good.
Yeah, I'm so here for it. I'm so here for that kind of that action, just cutting, promising people something at the well, then cutting them when you need to. 100% love it.
I have to say, Joel looked very pleased with himself when he snuffed Richard's torch.
He's living out his dream, isn't he?
He is.
Even when he said the line.
Brutal, he's like, time to go. Well, so doesn't even move out the way for him to walk out.
I don't think Richard, unfortunately, obviously he's been very hard done by. I don't think he was voted out for the right reasons. The other thing that we have to mention is when Richard gets voted out and he stands up to go, we can't not say that his trousers from from the top of his waistband to about mid-leg are ripped, and his cacs are just out to show.
Oh, Richard.
What did he do?
He had a rough hour of TV. And then at the end, what was it he said in his final words? The tribe voted out their strongest player.
Yeah.
just to top it off and make him look even more stupid.
He was so good. Some people don't want to play the game against the strongest players. Yeah. He's so petty, and I'm so here for it.
I thoroughly enjoyed Richard. I think it's such a shame that it got cut so short.
Yeah. Bad tribe draw. But we'll always remember his in Requiem as, all his great moments, not telling his skills on the boats, rubbing a small piece of wood against a larger piece of wood.
And saying, I'm going to have to survive. Oh, so good.
Ultimately, with this tribe, though, the Calaton tribe, I don't think we really know where people sit. I think Richard was the easy vote. There aren't a huge amount of divisions. So I think if they lose another immunity challenge, it's still very fresh, I think. I don't think there's really a sense of who was in control and who was driving the vote.
So if I had to guess, I would say that the core alliance is Nathan, Tanuke, Rachel, Lawrence, just based on who was hanging out near each other and things like that. And I think Jess is obviously floating around there. Matthew, I'm not sure if he's in that core alliance because he doesn't seem to be spending that much time with them, but I think he's probably being clued in on it. And then obviously you've got Leilani floating around there as well, and Shai is quite clearly in a rough spot.
Brilliant. We then go into episode 2. I think episode 2, like we said, way better than episode 1.
Yeah.
Top tier. Episode starts with Calaton, the fallout from Tribal Council. There's a great scene early on where they talk about Calaton trying to find some relief. We then immediately cut to Matthew peeing in a bush. Credit to the editing team for that one.
But not credit for the editing team for the scene where we're talking about Shai getting votes at last night's council and how he's feeling a bit awkward this morning. And then it's Nathan and Tanuke having this conversation. And then Shai walks over and they stop talking, except they don't stop talking because Nathan's mouth is clearly still moving and they've clearly just taken the audio out.
It's so fake. You can see him nodding in the background. Like that is the big takeaway, though, from the Calaton tribe, isn't it? It's Shai recognising he's overplayed his hand slightly and trying to be a bit more subtle about it. I don't know how possible that's going to be. I think that character just comes out naturally, doesn't it?
I think it's very possible that they're going to need to keep him, to be honest. I can't see them keeping both Jess and Leilani if they go to Tribal Council again. I think one of them will go, just because Shai's proved himself to be very strong in challenges. And he doesn't look that strong, but he was probably the second strongest person in that challenge. So I think he's got enough leverage to keep himself around. I think he just needs to build those connections and then he's set.
Yeah, definitely agree. And it was also great in that first Calaton scene to have Lawrence having a moment with Jess, talking about making fire, eating breakfast for the first time, and then his comments around wanting to build a power station on the island. Immediately, he wants to globalise and urbanise the island.
Everything he says is just great.
What are your overall thoughts on him? Particularly kind of, he said in his bio he wanted to play the buffoon, and that's come out a bit. What are your thoughts on him as a character?
Yeah, I think he's doing very well in what he said his game plan was going to be so far. I can't see him going for a long time, to be honest. Like, they set him up, gave him his introduction, and then he's just been there making quips. Yeah, he seems to be clued in on what's going on. I think he's fine.
He has a lot of ironic, dry sarcasm, which is going down very well in my house.
What is it? There'll be no ice in my martini or something in the opening.
There'll be no martini. Nathan and Tanuke think they have the power. I was really interested by said they basically steered it with one conversation, and it kind of stoked to. I don't think there was a huge amount of strategy in that first tribal council if it's just one conversation. But I do get the sense, like you said, I think Tanuke is clearly the best survivor player on that beach. I think Nathan is just kind of a natural leader. And I think they really do have a lot of the kind of the say in what happens and probably who's going to go next.
Completely agree. I think there's no way that either of them are going to go in this stage of the game. So I think they've set themselves up really well.
When we transition over to La Nena, obviously they're feeling happy that they didn't go to Tribal Council. Christopher, again, I don't want to say he's sucking up this time, but he's talking about, shall we bet on coconuts who goes? Yeah. I don't believe him. If I'm really honest, he just doesn't feel sincere.
There's something kind of salesman-y about it.
Yeah.
The way he says things. It's really interesting. But I think he's clearly not having any problem making social connections. So I think that's probably just him, and they're just showing some of the biggest things he says, and it's coming across a bit much.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. What I did love to see, though, in that particular part, though, was the whole tribe is singing Glamorous.
I was going to say, we got our musical scene.
Very quickly, music has united them. They get through the chorus, and Lee starts to rap.
Yes.
Are we counting this as an official tally on the rap chart?
We are indeed.
I told you, man, people who think they can rap love to rap. Only took him 2 episodes. Oh, man. But yeah, music's going to come up throughout this episode. Absolutely loved it. Anything else to say about La Nina?
I don't think so. Just that Ashley's injuries obviously brought up again in preparation for this whole potential boot plotline going throughout this episode.
Yeah. And she's really leaning into this, isn't she? She's really worried that that's going to be a main thing that's going to get her to go. And interesting that she said she can't go in water
or
grip
she's
anything.
Not allowed to get it wet, so I'm not... It must be pretty bad if she's not allowed to get it wet. That would suggest that it needs to be wrapped or stitches, maybe. I'm not sure. Yeah. But I think, fortunately for Ashley, it turns out that she's a pretty solid player later on in the episode, so she doesn't have too much to worry about on that front.
We then go to Tree Mail again.
Joe's favourite segment.
And this is where Joel delivers, again, the line that just took me out of it, where he said, Tree Mail? Oh, it sounds like email. I get it now.
Yeah, that was too much for me.
But yeah, I really wonder if this is going to stick around the whole series. Going to get Tree Mail? I don't know.
I feel like it is, unfortunately.
We'll get the tweets in now. Let's get that out. But it lets us know that both tribes will be going off to a reward challenge. And this is a fantastic reward challenge. So they're playing for both fishing gear and some seasoning, some salt and pepper for the rice and for the fish they catch. And the challenge, they need to slide down a slip and slide and grab a netted bag almost full of coconuts and then try and put it in their square, while someone from the opposing tribe is trying to do the same thing, and they can wrestle and tussle and try and see who's there. We get a couple of rounds and some really interesting ones. I'll just run through the rounds and then we can dive into what we thought. So we had first Matthew against Chris, and Chris wins that one relatively easily. We had Rachel versus Ren. Again, Rachel dominates and wins. Really interesting one. Hannah versus Lawrence. Loved that they did the challenge cross genders. Thought that was brilliant. Hannah put up a great fight. Ultimately, Lawrence wins. Then Tanuke versus Rachel. Rachel wins that one quite easily. Lee versus Shy. We can chat more about this in a second, but ultimately Lee wins in convincing, cocky fashion. And then finally, Doug versus Nathan, where Doug wins and seals the victory for La Nena. Lots happening in the reward challenge. What were some of your favourite parts?
I loved Ren going down the slide on their bum and just not even getting anywhere near the bottom. Obviously, the Lee versus Shy thing is hilarious. Lee just winding everyone up even beyond that. And then the Nathan versus Doug thing, probably the only time in my life that anything I would class as sport has made me feel something. So congratulations to them. It was truly a sight to behold.
You're thirsting, are you?
Not like that. No, I just thought, like, Doug coming back and winning that after looking like he was down and out was just great.
Oh, okay. I thought you were legit just talking about when they were oiling up with the lube.
Oh no.
There we go. Totally mischaracterised you there. But yeah, I thought there were some interesting choices here. So there were three tactics that I thought were really, really interesting that totally didn't work. So the first one was Matthew, who was just so overly keen.
Oh my
He
god.
does a forward roll.
It looks like he's going to snap his neck.
It was brutal. So he does a forward roll down the slip and slide. It looks pretty much concussed. And when he gets to the bottom, it's all he can do is like hang on to Chris. So his method didn't work. As you mentioned, Ren with the butt slide. And I thought this was the cleverest. They were clearly thinking the netted bag is going to land behind us. So I'll go down slower with a butt slide,
Yeah.
be first to it, and hopefully win. Totally didn't work. You know, they ended up
because the first one between Matthew and Chris, it almost seemed as though like production weren't quite aware of how fast they'd be going down the slide. So like that one was quite a while after they got to the bottom, but then they seemed to pick up the pace with the rest of them, and it seems like the contestants were planning on that coming down a little bit slower. So if someone came down slower than another person, like they were out of it.
Yeah, and I loved them actually with Nathan and Doug. This was the third method that I thought was probably the worst one. Is that Nathan did like a seal fly, where he, rather than going directly down onto the ramp, he sort of raised himself up and then smacks it as he went down. Yeah, very brutal.
The whole thing looked kind of painful.
Oh, so much fun though. So much fun. Those are the challenges I think are absolutely brilliant. So let's talk about Lee and Shy. So they both go down. Once they get to the bottom, Lee is quickest to the bag. He turns around and grabs the bag. Shy tries to chase him on the slip and slide and just absolutely gets his feet taken out from underneath him, slipping on the lube and smacks his back. Lee then runs the whole way, taunting him. Come on then. And he gets to the square, and before he places it down, he says, come on, try and get it, before ultimately placing it down. Oh, man.
The gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah. Definitely a villainous moment. But
I have to say though, cycling back in Lee's intro video, I was not aware of how successful he was in his career as a boxer.
yeah.
There's a lot of titles on there that I was. I mean, obviously, I thought he was a good boxer, but I didn't realise he was quite so internationally acclaimed.
Yeah, anyone who fights in Madison Square Garden, you've got to be pretty high up there.
Yeah.
And he's competitive, isn't he? That comes through. But I'm so here for the pettiness. Like that moment, I could have watched that all day. I would have wanted him to like just wait until he was like right close, and then just tap it down at the end.
I mean, you know me, as much as I'm here for the strategists, I'm also here for the messy characters. So I very much appreciate Lee's presence.
Oh. And Doug Nathan Bowl, I was very interested. They did that slow-mo with the lube. That was... I don't know if they signed up for that one. That was...
Yeah. And they're all like, even his back has muscles. Like, yeah.
I don't have a six-pack, I have a barrel. We go then to camp life. We start off with La Nena, where Doug is talking about how much he loves fishing, how his dad is going to be super proud that he's gone out. He talks about pilchards. I doubt there are any pilchards in the Dominican Republic.
People sharks, I thought.
What I do think is interesting is they're so close, the two beaches. You know, I could see a little bit sort of across. There's probably maybe there are rules about not going to the other camp, but you know.
Yeah, I was surprised. Like they're literally just the other side of an outcrop.
You go out fishing at the same time. Suddenly, you're having a cross-tribal alliance.
Yeah.
I think the other key scene that happens once we get back into the camp at La Nena is Chris immediately stirring the pot.
Yeah. So I read this as a bit of a faux pas on Hannah's part here. I think clearly Chris and Ashley were pretty close, and she probably should have read that a little bit better, that Chris was probably leaning towards working with Ashley.
Yeah, I do agree. Bad read by Hannah. But it also felt very much like Chris was manufacturing that situation to be able to then use it to his advantage.
Yeah.
Almost school-like, isn't it? Where you used to go up to someone and be like, "Oh, I'm always really interested in who has a girlfriend and who likes who. Who do you like?"
Yeah.
And then immediately once you know, you run and tell them, "Oh, they like you. They like you."
But it also seemed as though like Chris and Ash had already got to that part in their relationship where they assumed that they were going to trust each other, because Chris walks over to Ashley and he says, "Look, I feel like we trust each other, and I'm going to tell you everything." And Ashley's just sort of like, "Well, yeah." Like, go on.
I bet he's done that with everyone though. I bet they showed the Hannah one, but I think you're right, and you're right. Bad read by Hannah. You never throw out a name or never throw out. And I feel that was a rubbish way to throw out a name. Just saying, we've got to think about who's injured when there's only one person injured.
Yeah.
It's not really veiled who you're thinking about. Yeah, I bet Chris has done that with everyone, and he's said the names to all the people as well.
Yeah, and I think that would be a problem on a new US season, but I think in terms of the first UK season, I think Chris is playing a good game. I think he clearly knows what he's doing. He's clearly already manipulating people, making sure that he's the centre of all the alliances. I'm pretty impressed with how he's playing.
Yeah. I think that it does raise the question that Ashley starts talking about, them needing to stick together. And she kind of talks about the four, doesn't she? She talks about herself, Chris, Doug, and Ren.
Yeah.
And it really starts to raise the flags of this storyline of how in are Doug and Ren.
Yeah, and there's a confessional later on where Ashley says that she's confident about Doug and Rach and Christopher, but she's worried about Ren because she hasn't built up that relationship yet. And I found that was oddly placed. It gives me concern for Ren's place in that alliance moving forwards. But I didn't know if it was just there just to cause a bit of drama to make us question, oh, maybe this isn't the majority, maybe these aren't voting together.
Yeah, I quite liked that they are in the middle. I think, I think it's quite a strong position for Doug and Ren to be in terms of the flipping, which usually wouldn't be seen as a good thing, but I think in this environment might be quite positive.
Yeah,
I think
agree.
They're clearly unsure, and like you say, we'll touch on a little bit more around kind of some of that dynamics. Because with Lenena, we then move into a great scene talking all about the smells and the hygiene of the camp.
Yeah.
Matthew gives a great confessional where he says that he's been to festivals and he hasn't changed his underwear for a few days, but this is pretty bad.
Do you not think that Matthew has like a very old vibe about him? Like, he doesn't talk like a teenager, or I mean, I know he's not a teenager, but he doesn't talk like a younger person to me. He talks like quite an old soul.
Do you think so? I didn't get that vibe from him. I think he comes across quite immature, if I'm honest. We also get the great scene with Rach getting a fly in her eye, saying this is her one phobia, having something in her eye.
I hated the framing of this. So Pegleg tells us that all Rach does is moan. And if the only thing they can show us of Rach moaning is that she's got a literal fly on her eyeball and she can't get it off, then clearly she's not moaning.
Oh, it's the what did she think would happen as well? Like, why wasn't she prepared for a fly in her eyeball? But that scene, I think, did really show that I think Lee and Pegleg are starting to form a bond. I don't think it's been vocalized as an alliance yet, but they're definitely two people who get on really well. And
yeah, I was disappointed with this introduction to Rach as well, I'll be honest, because I was really high on her in the pre-season, obviously, and then she doesn't get any content in the first episode, and then the first thing we hear in the second episode is that she moans all the time. So I think that's a shame. I hope this isn't one of those where like they paint someone in a negative light and then people watching the show jump onto that bandwagon and think, oh, Rach is just this young girl who moans about everything, because that's clearly not true, and I don't really like when shows frame it in such a way that's biased in one way or another.
I stand with you with that, and actually all of the confessionals, because we then get Tremel again, and Sabrina starts hyping everyone up and rah-rahing everyone, and it's Rach again who sort of just calls out. Actually, I don't think she realizes, how annoying she is. So Rach is getting a lot of those confessionals. They're a little bit petty. Again, here for the pettiness, but yeah, we hope that's not the only edit she gets. We hope some of that strategy comes forward.
Yeah.
And I thought this scene for me really showed the difference between Sabrina being a great motivator in comparison to Ashley being a great leader. So I think,
Yes.
Sabrina can definitely hype people up and kind of say, we can do this, visualize, achieve, all that stuff. But it's Ashley who's really showing the leadership qualities of let's do this together, let's work together, and bringing people in. Very different skill sets.
Yeah, Ashley is very much like, this is the group. Let's stick together. We'll make it through this. And it's very necessary for her to do that in order to stay in the game, knowing that she's probably on the chopping block. But also she does it in a way that makes it seem like she's doing this because this is the group and she really wants the group to move forward together. And I think conversely, Sabrina manages to both overplay and underplay this episode, in my opinion. She's so gung-ho about what she wants to happen, and yet there's not really a concrete plan that falls into place from her end.
Yeah, agreed. The other part I loved about getting Tree Mail, not at Lanena, but over at Calaton, was Matthew says the most incorrect line of any 2 episodes. So they get the Tree Mail, they hear there's going to be a challenge, and Matthew says, well, let's just go for it. We've got nothing to lose. We've only got everything to gain. Sorry, mate, that's not right. You actually, you could lose another tribe, mate. Just made no sense at all.
I admire his spirit.
I really, my stock of Matthew is not super high right now. He's not coming across as someone who maybe has the strategy part down in some of the things he says and some of the things he does.
Yeah, I think he's in an okay position at the moment, but I'm not really seeing how he's building those foundations strategically to be able to get himself further into the game.
We go then to the immunity challenge.
Okay, so for our second immunity challenge, the tribes have to row out in their rafty boat type things and then jump off, swim over to cages that are tied to, I assume, anchors, and they have a load of knots on them that they have to untie to release the cages. Inside those cages are loads of bamboo poles, pipes, and then they have to take all those back to the start to build a sort of Jenga tower around a pole, get it to reach a certain height, and the first tribe to reach that height wins immunity. I'm noticing a trend of challenges that are just taken from other versions, but they're like, let's make this huge.
Yeah.
It's very like the card tower challenge from other versions, except this time it's like 10 stories.
Yeah. I definitely agree. And I was a little bit surprised. So in this challenge, we have Calaton pulling out to an early lead. They're kind of neck and neck up until they're sort of undoing a lot of the knots. But eventually, Calaton do pull forward. Lanena struggle to undo some of the knots, particularly Sabrina and Rach. They end up having to go and switch with Chris and with Pegleg. That gives Calaton a really strong lead. And although there's a couple of scenes where some of their structure starts to fall, ultimately, Calaton does win the immunity challenge. Were you surprised that they got the victory?
No, because by that point, such a meal had been made out of this untying the knot situation that I think it was pretty clear that, although they do almost fumble it at the end when they decide to stack all the bamboo on one side just to try and reach the top really quick, only for it to fall apart. But what do you think seemed to be the issue with the knot? Was it purely down to lung capacity because Chris seemed to be able to go down and do it easily, or were they literally just not able to untie that knot?
Yeah, so I think there's probably something around strength a little bit in this. I can only think that particular knot, maybe someone pulled it the wrong way and it just became a little bit too tight, and maybe they just didn't have the finger strength to go in and untwine it. It wasn't really clear, to be honest, but I think probably they were both a bit tired. From what we saw of the edit anyway, it looked like neither of them could hold their breath particularly long.
Yeah, and I think another funny moment from this challenge is when Sabrina swims back. Obviously, Chris swims back out, and Sabrina stands on the raft and shouts, "We don't quit, guys!" And obviously, she didn't quit when she swam back and obviously swapped out with Chris. But it's just very funny, comparing what just happened.
Well, later she's going to get praise for that. She's going to get praise from recognizing that she couldn't do it, which I just think is no better than...
It's quite interesting, this theme of recognizing your weaknesses, because same with Leilani in the first episode, where because they recognized that they couldn't do it and sort of switched out, people aren't holding that against them. And I think that's good, because I don't think it's great when someone messes up for something and immediately gets voted out for it.
Yeah, agreed. I thought good challenge. I was really proud of Calaton. I was really worried that they were going to get butchered every time, but really liked that this is sort of the perfect challenge for them. But also thought it was really interesting that we haven't seen a puzzle yet. I wondered if that's maybe because it's new season, don't want to complicate it too soon, but yeah, would have thought we'd have seen a puzzle 4 challenges in.
Yeah, these are, I mean, they're not all strength-based. They are all testing different physical powers, but yeah, there's nothing really mental yet. I do want to mention in the challenge another iconic Jess moment. Obviously, this is edited out of context, but there's one point where they're building the tower. Jess is facing away from the rest of the tribe, and she just goes, "Stay calm, everyone. You got it." Like clapping, not facing them at all. It's just so funny.
Oh man, she's so iconic. Oh, okay, brilliant. So after the challenge, then we go back and we're into kind of some of the scramble. So really quickly, Sabrina starts off by apologising for both her and Rach not being able to do it, which was so.
Never a good idea.
That is exactly what I would do though. So I loved in a way that she was trying to paint someone in a bad light and also hide them. I do think it's quite a clever tactic to kind of apologise on someone else's behalf to make them look a little bit silly. Didn't quite work out in this instance. I think Rach was a bit switched on. She knew what was happening.
Yeah, I think by apologising for someone else, you're trying to take control of that. But I think letting them sink or swim is probably the way to go with it. Like, if they're not going to apologise and people are going to get annoyed about that, then that's to your advantage, really.
Yeah. And very quickly, we have these 2 divisions form. So on one side, we have Ashley, Rach, Chris, and then almost on the peripheries, we have Doug and Ren, who appear to be with them, all leaning towards voting Sabrina. And we have this really interesting scene where Rach is sort of questioning whether or not they can trust Doug to be part of their alliance. What did you make of that?
Yeah, and what worries me for Doug moving forward into the later game is when he was speaking to each group, he came across as very non-committal, a bit sketchy. Like, I wasn't believing what he was saying, and I wasn't there. So I think that could be a problem for him potentially later down the line. But for now, he managed to convince people that he was going to vote with them.
Yeah, it was a definite red flag. What I thought was really interesting is, so they have the conversation and the 5 of them sort of commit to vote out Sabrina. And then immediately Doug goes, all those lot are just talking about you and they think that they're going to vote off you, Sabrina. You know, Immediately there was no hesitation around who am I going to say. And the only thing I want to say is I think Doug's significant other is very safe that Doug can never cheat on them. Because there's a moment when Lee says to Doug, "Oh, so who did you say you would vote for?" And you can see the panic on his face as he goes, I was just washing the pot." Terrible lie. This man cannot lie to save his life.
I mean, I've got faith that he might be able to get it under control. I think, like, just the first time he has to lie in the game and he's confronted with it, like, face to face immediately, you can just see the panic set in, like, complete deer in the headlights.
And honestly, the better move here, isn't it, is just to say, well, I had to agree with them. What else could I do? You know, that's the obvious thing to say. No one's going to hold that against you. But say, I didn't say anything. I was just washing a pot listening. You know, it doesn't build faith in anyone. So this core group then, seemingly, Sabrina is trying to pull them all in the direction of tribe strength and wanting to vote out Ashley. But we get 2 confessionals with both Pegleg and Lee, where they both say they're not really sure, and they're leaning towards also voting out Rach because of her attitude.
Yeah, I mean, this was disastrous to me. Like, it clearly shows that Pegleg and Lee are unaware of the alliance-based nature of the game at this point. I think Sabrina's kind of switched on, knows what she needs to do. She's just not quite able to get it there. But the fact that Pegleg and Lee, I mean, if you want to target Rach, but they don't seem to be bothered about trying to get Sabrina and Hannah's votes onto Rach either. They're just like, oh yeah, they're voting Ashley, but you know, maybe at Tribal we'll change our mind, which obviously they eventually do. But splitting that vote, even if Doug voted with, say, Sabrina for Ashley, like, Sabrina's still going home because they've split the vote. So it's just disastrous.
Yeah, and again, I think it speaks to the difference between Ashley and Sabrina. Ashley, although I think it hurts her game a little bit to be the one driving the vote and kind of putting it out there, in the
Yeah.
end, it saves her because she's rallying people around. This is what we're doing. This is the plan, as opposed to Sabrina, who hasn't got people's commitments. And yeah, I really agree. When I sort of saw those confessionals, I kind of knew. I thought that Doug was going to be siding with the majority that had a firm plan. Ultimately, they then go to tribal council, and there's some really fantastic moments inside of tribal council. And again, some talk where Sabrina talks about wanting to play an open, trusting, and honest game. She talks about tribe strength. We have this fantastic moment in tribal council where Lee calls out Rach. So Lee is asked what he thought went wrong, and he talked about you shouldn't put yourself forward if you if you don't think you can do it. Rach immediately takes offence and says, I didn't say I could swim. And she makes this really interesting distinction where she says, I volunteered, but I didn't ask to do it. And I'm just wondering, Matt, is there ever a scenario where you can volunteer for something, but also not be asking to do it?
I mean, I get what she means. It's that case of I'll do it if no one else wants to, but I am not sure that's what she did. And B, I think you're just better off saying, yes, I can do that. I did do that. It was untying the knot that was the problem. It was nothing to do with the fact that he was accusing her of saying, oh, she could swim and dive, but it turned out she couldn't do it. That's not really what she had the problem with. So I think obviously in that moment she's on the defensive. She's trying to say what she needs to say, but I feel like she didn't really need to defend that, honestly.
Yeah, it was a tough one. And you listen back when she says, I'm a vocalist, I can hold my breath. For me, she is saying she can do it. I don't think that was just I'll do whatever. I think take the L on that one. Lovely with the pettiness calling it out. I don't think it's going to do him any favours long term, but great TV. I do want to touch on, in this whole sort of, I suppose, discussion both about strategy and at tribal council, we haven't seen Hannah at all, really. I didn't really hear from her, didn't get a sense of where she was leaning, what she was thinking.
Yeah, I have massive concerns for Hannah moving forward. She's clearly on the outs of this group. And not only on the outs, but she's on the outs of the outs, because Lee and Pegleg obviously vote the same way, but Hannah doesn't. I feel like she felt she was in a solid alliance with that 5, including Doug. She went with the way Sabrina holds the vote, and it just didn't work out for her.
Yeah, and really great time to transition to the votes. So ultimately, Lee and Pegleg vote for Rach. Sabrina and Hannah vote for Ashley. And that leaves our 5 remaining people in the alliance: Doug, Chris, Ashley, Rach, and Ren, who all vote for Sabrina. And Sabrina becomes the second person voted out of Survivor 2023. And you've mentioned this before, Matt. I can't believe the minority didn't vote together. What? There wasn't even talk of splitting a vote. It was just like a lack of communication around what they were going to do.
But Pegleg and Lee can't have said to them, we're considering changing it, because Sabrina would have been like, absolutely not. No way are you doing that.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't look good for them going forwards. We're at a unique point where they, if both Doug and Ren switch, they still could have the majority, but they're only 1 vote away from kind of not being in that position at all, and it looking really, really dire.
And I feel like at that point, wouldn't you rather keep the trust with the people that you've built trust with, other than switching and no one trusting you fully?
Yeah, agree. Sabrina felt like she had a really short run in this. We're going to do points in a second based on our fantasy draft, but someone that I think we both had going deep in this.
I thought she would be the first boot of this tribe.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Wow. Gosh. I thought she was going to go deeper.
I just looked at this tribe and thought, I don't think she's going to fit on this tribe. That was my gut instinct.
Yeah. What didn't come through, and again, this would be so good if we had some videos, is her personality really didn't feel like the bio that we saw and got. She felt like a totally different person.
Well, one of the things she said in her bio was that she's learned not to dull her shine, which I think could be the kind of thing that you're talking about there with not feeling the full personality. But I also found it quite funny in the fact that she was annoying people with how loud she was, and she said that was her at her dullest. So I imagine she's quite a huge, excitable personality. So yeah, I think it's a shame we didn't get to see Sabrina at her best. I mean, we saw a lot of Sabrina, but a lot of the time it was people dragging her a bit.
So that takes us really nicely then into our fantasy teams. So in our fantasy draft, we each chose 7 contestants that would form our team. And each week they survive, we get a point longer. So Matthew, do you want to run through your team?
Yep, so my team was Doug, Ren, Tanuke, Nathan, Ashley, and Rachel.
So everyone on your team is still in the game. No one's been voted out. That means you take away from this the full 14 points.
Whoop, whoop.
I have to say, Matt, I'm a lot less confident in my fantasy drafts. So on my team, I have Lawrence, Matthew, Rach, Shy, Christopher, Sabrina, and Lee. Obviously, Sabrina was voted out in episode 2. That means I have a total of 13 points. So currently you are in the lead.
Yay.
Still all to play for.
There is.
Fantastic. That brings us, I think, to the end of our recaps of both episode 1 and 2. Matt, any sort of final thoughts on either the episodes in general or bits we've missed?
Yeah, I mean, although there was a lot I had to say that was negative, I am really excited for this season. I think there's a lot of interesting storylines that have been set up, and I think a lot of this cast have a lot more game savvy than we were giving them credit for, I'd say. Certainly on Lenena, there's going to be a lot going on, and I think we will start to see Calaton break out into smaller groups as well.
Yeah, that's my real hope, that Calaton picks up the strategy. Like we say, episode 2 was so good. I think because Lenena did understand the game slightly more, they were playing it at a higher level. But agree, we're really excited for episodes 3 and 4 that come up this Saturday and Sunday. Overall, I think we just want to give a shout out to all of the people who've kind of engaged with us. It's been awesome. We're expecting to drop on Thursday another podcast, we're going to be going through each contestant one by one who are still in the game and talking about whether their stock has risen, whether their stock has fallen, and what that means for the future. Matt, do you want to do the shout outs?
Yeah, so if you're just getting into the Survivor UK season, share this podcast with everyone you know, get everyone involved. We really want to get people digging deep into the strategy and the social dynamics. You can follow us on Instagram at the Sit Out Bench, all lowercase with full stops in between, over on X at the Sit Out Bench. Yeah, and just give us all your questions, send us anything you want us to answer, and we love interacting with you guys.
Fantastic. What we'll also do is on Spotify, we'll have a poll where you can vote for which tribe you think is going to lose the next immunity challenge. So let us know your thoughts. Will it be Calaton or will it be Lenena voting someone out next? But from us here, that's everything. See you next time.
Bye-bye.